welcome to the very first Speed Roller session for 2026. Today we're very excited to run through our synchronization feature. It is a relatively new feature that we've been beta testing over the last kind of 6 to 12 months, and we're finally at the stage where we have fully released it for the most part across most applications. So thank you so much for joining us. If you do have any questions at any point, feel free to put them into the chat or the Q&A. I'm not sure which one's better. Gabby, we can just pick one, but either way, if you've got any questions along the way, please chuck them in there and I'll go through those at the end. So the idea is I'm just going to run through a little bit of a presentation, death by PowerPoint for 2 slides, and then we're going to dive into the demo. So you'll hopefully have all of your questions answered by the end of this. So synchronization, what is it and why do you need it? Well, as you can see by this little video over here, synchronization just takes each of your individual devices or screens and keeps the content perfectly in sync. So you can do things like these video walls where they're portrait and landscape content, but probably more commonly you're going to do things like menu boards where they're sitting next to each other to keep content flowing separately. But there are really no rules. You can do pretty much whatever you want as long as you've got the content creation capabilities to do that yourselves. So that's the output, I guess, is something like that, and that was showcased at our standard integrate last year. Prerequisites. So what do you actually need in order to use synchronization? Advanced or pro licenses are required. So depending on your account, you'll need to either upgrade from basic, but chances are most people here already are on the advanced or pro licenses. Ideally, identical screens and media players is recommended, and that's just simply because the hardware differs from device to device. So you may notice that there is some kind of latency if you're using an older device or a newer device, or even across manufacturers. So try to do that as much as possible, but test it and see how you go. Ideally, you're running the latest version of our application, or at a minimum, the application versions that are listed here. That's just simply because before this, synchronization wasn't released. So if you're running Android version 2.5.2, it's just not going to work because the device doesn't know how to do it. So if you're going through the update process, please update it to the latest version, and your resellers can help with that, or get the latest version from our support site. Stable internet and network connection is the other one. So synchronization does rely on either an internet connection or a local network connection, which is on this next page, depending on the type of sync server that you are going to be using. So this is a little bit technical, and I think you can have a chat to us or help your reseller as to the best way to do this. But essentially, there's 2 different ways. So Fusion hosted goes through our servers based in Sydney, and that just means we're using our server to try and keep your devices in sync. The further away you are from Sydney, you may notice some minor latency, and we're talking milliseconds to see when the content kind of shifts over. And that's just simply because all the devices are connecting to the server saying what content should I be playing when, and then coming back. In all of our testing, this is kind of negligible when you see it. But if you do notice that this is kind of not on par with what you guys want for your brand, you have a second option, which is host your own server. So this turns one of your local devices into a local server, no longer relies on the AWS servers based in Sydney, and you can then get a little bit better latency depending on your local network. Obviously, things like Wi-Fi and local network speeds are also going to come into it. So there are other benefits for using local in terms of if the internet does drop out, then obviously you can't communicate with the servers based in Sydney, so they won't be in sync again. So using a local server, if you're worried about your internet connection, may be the best way to do it, but play around with both of them and see how you go. We recommend starting with the AWS servers and then going to local if you need to, but local may be good if you have troubles with your installations as well. Cool, demo. I'm going to dive straight into this. So how do we actually set this up within the portal? So in here, under the deploy section, you'll notice I've set up a couple of screens: sync bottom left, bottom right, top left, top right. And that just corresponds to these beautiful screens that I've set up in my player browser here. So these are just 4 separate players that I've got just in here for testing purposes. So if you need to demo this or you showcase it or do some testing yourself, you can do this within your browser just to see how it's all working. So you notice that these are not in sync in any way, shape or form at the moment. That's because I haven't actually done the process of putting them into a sync group. And this is where the content is going to look like this, where it's just going on an ad hoc basis. So let's get this into a sync group now. So the way to do this is go to your deploy section. At the top, you'll see your 3 tabs: individual, grouped, and synced. So synced over here, it allows you to create your first sync group. So create a new sync group, and I'll just call this 4-screen setup. And here is where you can choose your synchronization server. So these are the 2 options I mentioned: Fusion signage servers, which is the default, or if you want to host your own, you can come in here and then set up the player locally, get the IP address of that player, and then put that in here, and that's where all the other devices will communicate. So use our support page to figure out how to do that if you need to, but otherwise we're just going to use this one here. So you can set up a different sync group for every single I guess, array or every single synchronization group that you need, or we can just chuck a whole bunch of screens into the same group. But just keep in mind, if you put 100 screens in here, they will all try to sync, but if one of them drops out, you may have issues maintaining the rest. So in here, we would then move some screens in. So back to the individual section, I'm going to click on these and then move to a sync group, select the one that I just created, and then press submit. So over here now, I've added these 4 screens in. You notice they've already got some content, which I'll showcase in a second. But now that I've moved these, they're going to start the process of synchronization. So over here, it is going to take a minute, depending on the refresh cycle of these. So every 40 seconds to a minute, all of the devices will pull back to the server, get its new playlist content, and then start the synchronization. So as soon as you've published that content or put it into a synchronization group, it will go through that process and start the sync process. So you'll start to see them blink, and that's it doing its refresh process here. And then here, so now they're starting to get in sync. So this little array that I've set up here, which I'll showcase, the content is going to move this one video around the corner. So it goes top left, top right to bottom left, and the other content should stay the same on there. So we're syncing all of these screens together with that video kind of rotating around like a clock. Just a very simple setup, but ideally you can see how that synchronization now works. So how do you actually set up your playlists? So in here, you'll notice I've created a separate playlist for each. So bottom left, bottom right, top left, and top right. And then if I go to my dashboard and I open up each of those, the content in here is relatively the same. So it's got the first file, the second file, the third file, and the fourth file. They've got the same durations kind of set and the same video. So as I cycle through each playlist, you'll notice the same durations in the same order with that one video kind of cycling through. So the whole point is you create a playlist and put your files in, and whatever order they're in across those playlists, the sync group will just say, play the first file, play it to the end, wait, play the second file, third file, fourth file, and then rotate through. So if one file is set to, say, 15 seconds, but the other one is set to 4 seconds, all these other ones that are set to 4 will wait until that 15-second file completes and then move on. So it keeps everything in perfect synchronization. So that means you got to make sure that your content is in the right order and ideally the same duration in order for this to work. So each of these 4 playlists now have been deployed to one of the separate screens, and then that's how the content is rotating through. Do you have to use the separate playlists? No, not necessarily. So what we can do in this situation is we create a separate playlist here, put some content in, and I could just simply deploy this one playlist to all of my screens. So sync bottom, left, right, top left, and then hit publish. And that same process here will come through when it goes through that refresh process. It'll start to change that content individually, or if you can go to the screen and press get playlist and you'll see that content starts to update. So now what this will do when the sync group kind of refreshes itself is it'll go through and then it'll play exactly the same content on all of those screens. So this wouldn't be a menu board setup. This would be maybe if you've got 4 screens sitting around your premises and you just want the content to be exactly the same at the same time so that content maintains itself. So once the content kind of refreshes, all that content will come in, and I'll come back to that in a second. So the other thing that we can do if you have a pro license is use the tagging system. So instead of creating 4 separate playlists, 1, 2, 3, 4, you could use a single playlist and then send one piece of content to each screen and maybe have a video that plays across them all at the end. So we'll see over here, is these things syncing yet? Should be coming up soon. I'll set up this playlist anyway. So what we can do is under the tagging view, if you have the pro license, is now we can say, well, I want this file to play on the top left. So I'll come in and create a tag that says top left, for example, and I've already assigned these to the screens. I want this one to be in the top right, this one to be in the bottom left, and this one to be in the bottom right. So now I'll be sending one file to the top left, one file to the top right, bottom left, bottom right, but this file doesn't have a tag on it, so it will play across all of those screens. Make sure that these ones are in sync now. Just going to publish this one now, see if I can refresh it. So I've assigned this one playlist to all 4 of the screens that are in that group. Hit publish, and now we should be able to see what happens to that content. So come back to the deploy section. Okay, so that's updating now. So that's now updated. So it should play one of those files, and then it goes to the video across each, and then it'll go back to play its individual file. So these are just a couple of examples about how it can work in terms of synchronization, but the key is just making sure that each of the playlists or the content that you're deploying is in the same order across the same duration. Where's my presentation? There, cool. Some frequently asked questions. What happens if the device loses internet connectivity? Well, this is probably one of the issues using the servers. So it will attempt to sync every 50 seconds or at the end of each file. So if a device does turn off at any point, it will be excluded from that sync group. So the content will stay the same. It'll try and stay in sync, but it will no longer be kept perfectly in sync at the end of every video. This is where the locally hosted server might be the option if you think that your internet is going to be a bit of an issue. What if my media files have a different duration? So you could put different durations in. They will wait until every file has finished. So the first file is 5 seconds. The second file, one of them may be 10 seconds and the other one's 5. It'll wait 10 seconds, which means that content will just stay on the screen for an extra 5 seconds. So making sure it's the correct duration is preferable, but if it's an image, it probably won't necessarily matter. Why are my screens not syncing? So there's a couple of things that we can do. So verify that they're running the correct application version, confirm that the screens are assigned to an actual sync group, ensure that they're all online, and that if you're using the IP address of a local server, that it's actually correct. And then check all playlists contain the same number of media items or identical durations. So that's a couple of things that you can do. Can I add different types of devices to the same sync group? Yes, but then it's kind of contained within separate application groups. So Tizen and Android can be grouped together, and Windows, Web, WebOS, and BrightSign can all be grouped together. And this is just because of the way that they handle different rendering engines, and they handle synchronization slightly differently. But chances are you're probably all using the same screens in the same area, so that's probably not going to be a big issue. Cool. So that is the high-level overview of synchronization. So anybody have any questions or anything that you want to see in a little bit more detail? I'm more than happy to run through it.
Just quickly, Donna, I'm sorry, I just saw your message. Was there any points that you wanted James to go back over?
Obviously, I've only had our screens for a month, so that was so fast I couldn't even have no clue what you said. So maybe we can
very fast speaker.
Extremely fast, like. Yeah, I don't think I could keep up if I watched it back.
Sure.
Is there any point that you wanted?
I mean, obviously,
well,
one of the things is we've just installed 3 55-inch screens side by side, and one of the things I was wanting to do was play a video across all 3. So it not just syncing the screens to play the same content, but playing a video across all 3. Is that what this syncing?
Yeah, absolutely. So in that situation, you would just have to cut your video up. So you would have a 1920, what you said, portrait, did you say? So portrait, 1080 by 1920.
Yeah.
So in your first playlist, you would cut the first file at 1080 by 1920 and say this is file 1. In your second playlist, you'd cut the second portion of that, and then the third playlist. You have 3 different files, but when you look at them together, that's where they keep in sync. So yes, you can. Yep. You just
and is that software? Can we do that in the build or in the software system itself? So creating the file here, or
create a design that if you want to come in and create a design from here. Obviously, video content is something you can't create in here, so you need to do that separately. Something like Canva or something, you just create your video, but you can synchronize designs definitely. But yeah, just essentially upload your media into here and go, okay, on my left screen, for example, I want this one file. And then on my middle screen, I want this file, and my right screen, I want that file. Chuck them into the synchronization group, and it'll just start to sync.
Okay, cool.
We do have our support site as well. Obviously, this is going to go into a lot more detail as opposed to the speed roller session. And there is a demonstration right here that'll allow you to see exactly how to do it in a little bit slower. The conscious that, yes, I have had my coffee and I'm going through it as a speed roller. So, Randall, yes, you can synchronize zones. Zones are just a piece of content. So as long as you put the content in, yes. This comes down to our zone editor here, which is a feature that's not toggled on by default, but you could put your whatever content you want, save this zone into a playlist. As long as you've specified the duration of that zone when you put it in to be the correct duration, then it will keep in sync. Keep in mind loading times, depending on how much content is in that zone, but yes, it will. So I've answered the question. Thanks, Che. My account says that devices aren't compatible with sync. Is this because of software? Yes, I would imagine so, that if it says that it isn't compatible with synchronization, it's got to do with the application version. Reach out to your reseller, Haley, or get in touch with our team and we can have a bit of a look on your account to see how we can do that update process. In the portal, we do have access to remote updates in most situations. However, depending on how old the application is, it might not be available. Any other questions?
Would you recommend a certain software to actually cut a single video up into 3 sections, like what Donna was asking about?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on how technical you are. Obviously, the Adobe suite with After Effects or Premiere would be able to do it. There are some free tools out there. I think Canva might be able to do something similar to that. But yes, creating content at the larger resolution is pretty much the issue in most of these situations, especially with the fancier solutions. The one that you saw with kind of ours here. This was our creative team knowing and positioning all of this content so that we knew exactly the right between different sizes as well. We do have like slight aspect ratio changes or the size ratio changes. So to get it perfectly in sync, there is a bit of finesse to it. But if you do have all the same screens, then obviously creating your content is a little bit easier, but you do have to create it, potentially 7,000 pixels wide and then split it. But yeah, After Effects I think is the easiest way if you do have access to the Adobe suite. But otherwise, there might be some online tools they can do it.
Just a free. I'm not sure about resolution. It might be too small, but I think they have an online thing called InShot, and I use that just personally. That for cutting. It's really quite easy. They might have an online thing. I'm not sure whether the phone app would be higher resolution enough, but everything I've ever exported from that has always been good.
Right.
Yeah, so no doubt InShot, see if that works.
Perfect.
But they've got all the resolution sizes that you can play around with. It's all like inbuilt.
Potentially Canva, Donna. Yeah, I haven't used Canva in a while. I don't know whether they have kind of fixed canvas sizes, but if you could do your canvas to be, 1080 by 3, so 3,160 pixels, whatever it is, by 1920, and then cut it into the 3 files, then yeah, that's what I do. If not, just create it at that size and then use one of these other online platforms to crop it into the 3 files. Yep. Canva will work. Thanks, Natalie. Yeah, cool. So Canva's probably your go-to if you're looking to do that. Amazing. Well, if you do have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to us. The team are always here ready to help, and we would love to see what you guys end up doing with your synchronization feature. Great. Well, thank you for coming along to our first speed roller session. Please keep an eye on your emails for any other speed roller sessions that we're doing and give us any feedback about other features that you may want us to go through in detail, because we're more than happy to run these sessions, show you best practices and show exactly how to use Fusion Signage and get the most out of it for your money. Thanks for coming along, and we'll see you guys soon.